Bienvenidos.
Welcome to our presentation on
La Guerra Civil Española.
with a special focus on the Siege of Madrid.
I'm Siree.
And I'm Dan, and we will be your guides through this tumultuous,
Yet oft overlooked period of history.
the Spanish Civil War. Lasted 3 years, from 1936 to 1939.
But let's look at a timeline for some context.
Here's a map of Europe.
A timeline, Dan.
Fine.
Before the start of the Spanish Civil War, tensions were rising all across Europe.
In the 1930s, Stalin was in power,
Military science was advancing,
Hitler was in power,
and well,
the world was gearing up for World War II.
during the entire Civil War, things get more serious until
The same year the Civil War ends,
World War II begins.
as you can see, the Spanish Civil War is tucked in amongst all the World War II hoo-ha.
We aren't taught much about the Spanish Civil War in our history classes because it's overshadowed by World War II since it came right after.
In fact, there were only 5 months between Franco's final victory in April and the start of World War II in September.
But really it shouldn't be overshadowed because the death toll in La Guerra Civil was over 500,000.
Let's see how the Civil War built up.
The war was between the conservative nationalists, led by General Franco,
Versus the Republican forces, who were in support of the left-wing Popular Front.
Tensions in Spain were extremely high all through the 30s. Spain had a constitutional monarchy, but it's corrupt and inefficient.
And not able to deal with the depression at all. The king abdicates, abolishing the monarchy.
And Spain is declared a republic under a prime minister.
The republic faces several big problems.
First, two large resource-rich areas of Spain, Catalunya and País Vasco, are calling for independence.
But losing them would hurt Spain. The republic wants to lessen the church's high influence.
And the army's political influence as well.
Because of the depression, Spain is suffering dropping crop prices,
High unemployment.
wage cuts.
And the republic needs to do something to keep the vital support of the working class.
But the republic itself is suffering from political infighting because everyone's too radical.
So here's what the middle ground of the republic did, while the radicals were busy disagreeing.
They gave Catalunya some independence,
Separated church and state,
made army officers retire early,
nationalized huge estates,
and increased minimum wages so the industrialists would pay their workers more,
but this means that the republic made very powerful enemies.
who end up attacking the republic. First, some military officers attempt to overthrow the republic.
Then the right-wing party Cited formed, dedicated to protecting the Roman Catholic Church and landlords.
And then the left wing stops supporting republic because they wanted it to be more extreme and start riots. The prime minister resigns when he loses the support of the working class and socialists, and super right-wing Cited is elected.
And immediately undoes everything the republic did.
This obviously upped tension a whole lot,
No one likes losing rights.
and all the left-wingers were aware that the right-wing government would try and eliminate them.
So the left coalesces into the Popular Front, with strikes, riots, and violence.
Franco's army ruthlessly puts down the coal miners' strike in the Asturias, which is what the picture is of. Overall, Spain is very
Chaotic.
In an attempt to avoid war, a general election is called,
The left-wing Popular Front wins.
and the prime minister is put back. But
The Popular Front doesn't have much control, and the riots keep happening.
when a leading right-wing politician is murdered, everyone right-wing becomes very afraid, and wants a military dictatorship that'll protect them.
Meanwhile, in 1935,
Franco was made chief of staff of military under Cited. However, when the Popular Front came into power,
in 1936,
he was basically exiled. In this same year, rebel forces were already scheming and Franco chose to join them.
so on July 17th, 1936,
The Spanish Civil War began.
well, when we say the Spanish Civil War,
We really mean that a lot of Europe was involved,
okay, there was a non-intervention pact.
but certain countries decided to completely ignore it.
These were the overall political leanings of Europe.
The US was pro-Republican, but didn't get involved.
Hitler's Germany
Mussolini's Italy
and Stalin's USSR
were the only countries to break the non-intervention pact and directly intervene in the Civil War.
The Republic also had international brigades,
where over 30,000 volunteers from over 50 countries
came to Spain to help fight for the left wing. However, most of these volunteers had very little military training.
The two sides were numerically about equal in resources. However, the Nationalists were better organized since they were derived from the army and received a lot of material aid and soldiers from Germany and Italy.
The Republicans received assistance from the USSR and international brigades, but they weren't nearly as organized or trained as the Nationalists. The Republicans were also divided by internal conflicts between communist, socialist, and anarchist factions.
It's not about the size of their forces,
but how they used them. Now that we know why it started,
let's discuss the actual war. To keep it Madrid-centric, we're going to focus on what went down in Madrid.
First, as always, let's put it into context.
The massacre of the Montaña barracks is a key event because it explains how Madrid fell into Republican hands.
Basically, the Nationalist army is housed in the Montaña barracks,
surrounded by Republicans.
The Nationalists try to rebel, but they're overwhelmed and trapped.
Some Republicans storm the barracks and chaos ensues. Over time, the Nationalists would try to surrender, but some within their ranks kept shooting Republicans despite the surrender.
Eventually, these false surrenders angered the Republicans so much they massacred everyone.
Even the ones who surrendered. This is a picture of the barracks after the massacre.
This is Calle Ferraz, near the Plaza de España,
which the Republicans used to attack the barracks. You might have seen this road. It's pretty near school.
The Montaña barracks were to the left in modern-day the Booth Park. The only monument for this massacre is a sculpture at Temple of the Booth,
without any description.
So, the biggest event in Madrid during the Civil War was the Siege of Madrid,
which lasted basically the entire war. Madrid was the capital of Spain when the war started, so obviously it was very important that Franco won it.
Cue the Battle of Madrid.
In this corner were the Republicans,
supported by the international brigades, the Republican militia, and Rudy the anarchist,
and friends. And in this corner were the Nationalists,
divided into 4 parts, although only the first 3 spearheaded the attack.
So their battle plans were pretty straightforward.
The Nationalists wanted to attack from the west through Casa de Campo to avoid street fighting,
and take University City and Plaza de España.
You can see here how close Casa de Campo is to our school.
And there's the Montaña barracks next to Calle Ferraz.
And the Republican plan was to not let them pass.
No pasarán. So, let's break down the Battle of Madrid. We're giving it a lot of focus because, well, it was the most exciting thing to happen before the siege. Which...
you know, a siege is just a lot of great suffering.
So the battle starts on November 7th, when the Nationalists take 2 suburbs as a diversion, but they start moving straight through Casa de Campo so they can avoid street fighting in their march on Madrid.
But thanks to some intercepted plans, the Republicans managed to put up a strong defense and stop the Nationalists' 3-pronged attack.
Since they aren't getting anywhere, the Nationalists switch to street fighting, although they suffer heavy casualties since they are fighting on the Republicans' terrain. The Nationalists aren't doing too hot.
The Republicans counterattack across the front, but only push the Nationalists back in a few places.
On the night of November 11th,
not a creature was stirring,
except for the International Brigade attacking the Nationalists at the center of Casa de Campo.
But despite the severe casualties the Nationalists suffered,
the Nationalists succeeded in pushing through eventually.
The Republicans get reinforcements from their friends, the International Brigades, and Rudy the anarchist,
and use the International Brigades to target some Nationalist territory around Madrid.
Like the Siree de Los Angeles, pictured here, which is on the way to Toledo.
But the attacks fail for multiple reasons. A lot of times because of language barriers.
Stay in school, kids. In summary, the Nationalists are strong, but the Republicans are passionate about defending their home turf. Although every time they try to go on the offensive,
things don't work out.
The second phase of the Battle of Madrid is
the attack on University City, because on November 14th, the Nationalists finally fight their way through the Casa de Campo to the University quarter of Madrid,
under heavy artillery bombardment.
Casa de Campo is the green space on the left. They form a bridgehead on the river Manzanares, which they'd been wanting for a while,
because it's difficult to cross the river without a bridge. The Republicans keep fighting. Here they are in Casa de Campo.
But in the end, Franco takes over key hospitals and about 3/4 of the university city territory before he stops his attack.
Franco is busy fighting in other cities by this point, and the Battle of Madrid becomes a siege. As International Brigade member Peter Kemp wrote,
"A glorious assault had ended in a miserable game of hide-and-seek played by frightened men.
The front line in Madrid stabilizes.
And vital industries are moved into unused metro stations."
Which is really cool. We've been in metro stations.
Franco decides to take advantage of his German air support and use the Luftwaffe,
the German Air Force,
to bomb Madrid into submission.
Be warned, this video contains graphic newsreels of the bombing campaigns.
Eventually the line stabilized, and Madrid held out. So Franco tried a new tactic. The Civil War became a testing ground for modern weapons. It was a foretaste of what was to happen a few years later in London, Hamburg, Tokyo, and Leningrad. But until now, no city in history had been so sorely tested. Scenes like this, on newsreels all over the world, confirmed the sympathy that attracted so many people to the Republic.
Franco was trying to demoralize the Republic with his bombing campaign, but it had the opposite effect.
As the video said, it gave the Republicans international sympathy and was a widely criticized move.
The Madrileños were not going to give up fighting that easily.
But in 1938, Franco tightens the siege, content to starve Madrid out.
Through the winter, there are shortages of food, of warm clothes, arms, and ammunition.
The citizens suffer greatly.
By 1939, it's clear to everyone that Franco has pretty much won the Spanish Civil War. The Republicans have some infighting because the Communists want to fight to the bitter end, but the rest want to surrender for less punishment.
The Communists lose the infight, and the Republican leader attempts to bargain with Franco.
But Franco will only accept unconditional surrender.
Jerk.
He orders a general advance into Madrid. The Republicans fell away, and Franco wins Madrid.
And the war. Between 1939 and 1943, Franco executed or imprisoned up to 200,000 people.
After the end of the siege, Franco constructs a monument.
Valle de los Caídos.
For the fallen on both sides.
Franco called it a
national act of atonement.
But this monument is controversial because 10% of the workers were prisoners.
Including Republican political prisoners.
It took 19 years to complete.
Ouch. If you want to learn more about the Spanish Civil War,
our presentation in no way covers its entirety.
Here's a list of helpful resources.
Until next week.
Adios.
Bienvenido.